So, Daddy, when I was a little girl, we moved to the American Indian Reservation in Arizona. And I was about 6 months old, right? And you got a job. Where'd you get a job?
I got a job at Loop Boarding School.
And that was your first job?
As a counselor.
Oh, okay. And you were pretty young. How old were you?
I was 23, I think.
23. And what was it like when you and Mom first went out there?
Well, we went on Highway 66. It was old Highway 66 then. When we got to Arizona, about every 10 miles was a station that said, cautioned about driving without water and getting cars hot, and Carla got all excited about us breaking down.
But you didn't break down?
No, she bought a bag that I still have, and we had water on the front of carried it on the front of the car. Every Christmas we'd come back and visit in Oklahoma, and one time it was snowing and we couldn't drive, and we came on the train and had sleeper.
I remember that.
Yeah.
That was fun, actually. Huh. So, when you first started working at the boarding school, what did you think about it? What were your impressions?
Well, it was my first job.
Yeah.
And I could go back there and fit in just like that and do the job.
Yeah.
I was there at Navajo boarding school for 3 years. Loop boarding school for 3 years, and they opened a job corps at Winslow on the top of a mesa, and I was detailed as an educational psychologist to the Job Corps Center.
Right.
And I was there for a couple of years, and then I was promoted to Deputy Director of Corpsman Supervision for the Job Corps.
Mm-hmm.
And Carla didn't like it because I was all working with delinquent men from 16 to 22 years old.
And they were from the big cities?
And one time I had 17 employees under me, and I had an assistant that was a Marine, and one time one of the corpsmen was trying to have a girlfriend, and another one wanted a girlfriend, and he worked in the kitchen. He got a big butcher knife, and the financial officer and my assistant was an ex-Marine, and he came running up the hill saying that this boy was swinging that knife trying to cut this guy that was after his girlfriend, and the Spanish kind of resisted having these black boys in their community, and there was a lot of friction in it. Anyway, the financial officer and I got on each side of it, and that knife, and I got too close, and he swung that knife, and it cut my shirt and skinned my skin. And that's when Carla wanted me to
get a different job.
So I got detailed to I got a job at Kaibato, which is very remote. It's 160 miles to get groceries, and we'd go to Phoenix once a week,
Once
or
a month.
twice a week.
I thought once a month.
Once a month.
Once a month. Right? That's what I
Yeah.
remember.
Huh?
Once a month is what I remember.
Once a month.
Yeah.
And we'd go to Flagstaff sometimes. One time we came back in an unusual snowstorm in the desert.
Yeah.
And time we got to Flagstaff, it was deep snow, and we were worried about getting snow. And another time when we were in Nebraska, there was a terrible snowstorm, and I think quite a number of people died on the interstate.
Oh, wow.
So finally, Carla had her master's degree and wanted a career, and so I didn't intend to retire when I was 44 years old, although I was eligible for retirement in a year or two.
But you went and worked with Head Start.
Uh,
You worked with Head Start in...
I came back to Oklahoma and worked
Yeah.
with Head Start as
Yeah.
Developing a curriculum to train Head Start workers as what they called CDAs, and I initiated a program I got a contract at Winslow's, not at Wilburton, Oklahoma, and was there for 5 years and developed 144 units of instruction. And
And so then
the
you...
president of Rose State College thought that there shouldn't be a program like that at Winslow at Wilburton, Oklahoma, because it was not serving the entire state properly, and it wasn't a proper thing for it. So he underbid me by $1 and stole the program, and eventually lost his job.
I thought did that happen in Nebraska?
No.
No, that happened in Wilburton?
Wilburton.
Oh.
And then I moved the entire program to Saturn State College, and was there for 5 years. And one of the workers that was in charge of a Head Start program there stole my proposal
I remember
that I
that.
used in Oklahoma, and went through my desk and got the contract and underbid it. And I could have moved probably again, but Carla wanted a career, and
She was tired of moving, right?
she was tired of moving. We were both tired of moving around, and so I intended to come back to Oklahoma. She got a job at Oklahoma State University, and as an editor for agricultural publications, and was eventually promoted to department head. And at that time, computers were huge.
Mm-hmm.
The whole room was one computer
Yeah.
at the college, and she, they were intimidated the people that were working there, and Carla converted from filing system to computer system,
Mm-hmm.
and was eventually promoted to department head.
Right. Right.
I intended to finish up my PhD in uh, gerontology and got a lot of work in there, and recency of education started catching up with me, and I was losing my credits. I'd raised Arthur Sweet had a herd of registered red poll cattle, and he showed them, and Carla had liked red polls because she showed them when she was young, and so I started raising red polls, and in about 3 or 4 years I had 200 female cattle, and once a year I'd have about 200, and cattle were cheap, and I was used to a lot of more mental stimulation and responsibility than raising cattle, and I had a large interest in antiques, and for years I'd been collecting antiques from auctions and garage sales, and I decided to start after realizing the local history of this farm homestead here. There was Otto Gray's families, and Arthur Sweet had purchased it in 1945, I think. And he told me that he suspected that this was the site of 1832 campsite for Washington Irving's Tour on the Prairies. And so Carla and I researched it and documented, and eventually she published an article in the Chronicles of Oklahoma that documented as the Washington Irving's 1832 campsite, published in 1835, and it became a bestseller and romanticized what's now Oklahoma in the minds of the Easterners, and everybody thought this was the land of milk and honey. And when it opened up for settlement in 1889 and 93, helped create the frenzy and the land rush. Then we revived the Billy McGinney and Oliver Gray Cowboy Band legends that and eventually Carla published a book about the Otto Gray Cowboy Band.
Is that through Arcadia Press?
We nominated Billy McGinney for the induction in the Hall of Fame at the Oklahoma City Cowboy Museum, and he was awarded it. We submitted we were invited to submit proposal documented what the museum had accomplished in documenting forgotten, undeveloped, misdeveloped history, including the Battle around Mountains, to the National Association for State and Local History, and it won a prestigious award in competition with large and small museums across the United States. And we went to, I think it was Oregon, Portland, Oregon, and got the award.
So, Daddy, what do you see? What do you want to have happen with your collection?
What?
What do you want to have happen with your collection?
Well, I would like for Oklahoma to get interested in it, and if it probably has a value of $4 to $5 million if it was on the market. My personal collection is identified as Chlouber collection, and the donated articles, most of which are from the Gerald Johnson donation of Indian artifacts, are in the public domain, and they're identified as Gerald Johnson collection. And the Gerald Johnson collection is inventoried, and they're part of the public domain. But most of the collection is Chlouber collection, and if they...
You have some that's part of the museum collection, though.
They're part of the museum collection, but they're on loan from me to the museum.
Oh.
And so they're not particularly the museum, but if there was sufficient interest in perpetuating the museum in some rather intact way, I'd be interested in donating them under certain circumstances that they would be preserved. I don't think it's possible to mass as many rare items as I have. Some of them could easily bring on the market, if they become available, $10,000.
Yeah. So, but could you see some of the Otto Gray stuff going to a museum about music, and some of the Washington Irving stuff go to a museum about Washington Irving? Could you see it split up that way?
Maybe. I'll have to see what's developed. OSU is preoccupied with sports right now, and they got an art museum.
But it's mostly contemporary art.
In contemporary art that promotes the art program. I've got several paintings that would go in that museum.
Oh, that's a good idea. It's always nice to share, so that it's always nice for people to be able to know the history of the area.
Well, I don't think that it'd be possible to put together a collection like this. I've collected these artifacts over 50 years, and found a lot of them during the depressions in the 80s and the more recent depression. Bought them rather at a good price. When I started the museum, the newspaper editor, Gibbs, thought that it was impossible to develop, and he thought that I didn't have the resources to develop it, and I probably didn't. I wasn't a Gilchrist or a Phillips. But nevertheless, I put together over a period of 50 years a museum collection that probably, if it came out on the market, it'd be $3 to $5 million.
Okay, Daddy. Well, thank you for the interview, and I'll give you a copy of it when I
Okay.
get it.